I stare at my phone screen as it lights up with his name, Travis. The man who walked out on me when I was 9 months pregnant, telling me I would never amount to anything. 2 years of complete silence, and suddenly he wants to talk. My executive office at Warren Technologies feels too small all of a sudden. $33 million. That is what my father built, what I now control, what Travis never knew. My assistant watches curiously as my hand hovers over the phone. Why is he calling now? 4 years ago, I met Travis at my friend Melissa's 4th of July barbecue. He was grilling hamburgers, laughing with everyone, and when our eyes met across the yard, something just clicked. He had sandy brown hair that fell over his forehead just right, and a smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. By the end of the night, he had my number, and by the end of the week, we had gone on 3 dates. "You know what I love about you, Jody?" he said on our 5th date, as we walked along the riverfront. "You see the real me, not just some guy who hammers nails for a living. You see my potential." Travis worked for a small local contractor, but dreamed of starting his own construction company. He talked about it constantly, the plans he had, the niche he would fill in the market. I loved his ambition, his drive. As an elementary school teacher, I understood the importance of encouraging dreams. We got married after just 10 months of dating. It was a modest wedding at the local community center. My father, Frank Warren, wasn't there. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years, not since Mom died, and I blamed him for being too focused on his company to notice how sick she had been getting. His absence hurt, but I was determined to build a life without his money or influence. Travis respected that, or at least, that's what I thought at the time. "We don't need your dad's money," he would say whenever the subject came up. "I'm going to give you everything you need, Jody. Just wait and see." We rented a small 2-bedroom apartment across town from the nice neighborhoods. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I taught 3rd grade at Franklin Elementary, and Travis worked 60-hour weeks trying to save enough to launch his business. When I found out I was pregnant, we were ecstatic. Travis picked me up and spun me around our tiny living room, careful not to knock over the secondhand furniture we'd collected. "A baby," he whispered against my hair. "Our baby." The first few months of the pregnancy were wonderful. Travis painted the 2nd bedroom a soft yellow, built a crib from scratch, and rubbed my feet every night while we watched television. But around the 6-month mark, something changed. The late nights at work got later. The foot rubs stopped. The excited conversations about the baby's future dwindled. "Just tired," he would say when I asked if everything was okay. "The Johnson project is kicking my butt. Go to sleep, don't wait up." By the time I hit 8 months, I was waddling around our apartment alone most evenings, talking to the baby who kicked inside me, promising her that Daddy was just working hard to make our lives better. I actually believed that, even as doubt crept in. Then came the morning, everything fell apart. 9 months pregnant, I was on maternity leave and decided to surprise Travis by dropping off lunch at his worksite. He'd forgotten his phone at home, and I noticed a text notification flash across the screen as I picked it up to bring it to him. From Allison. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait for more after work. She'll never know, I promise." Allison, my friend from college. The one who had been checking in on me throughout the pregnancy, bringing me herbal teas and prenatal vitamins. The one who had been telling me how normal it was for men to get distant during pregnancy. With shaking hands, I unlocked Travis's phone. His password had always been my birthday. The evidence hit me like a physical blow. Hundreds of messages going back 6 months. Photos I never want to see again. Plans they were making, ways they were deceiving me. I confronted him that evening, my enormous pregnant belly between us like some cruel joke as I held up his phone with the evidence. "How could you? With my friend? For 6 months?" Travis didn't even try to deny it. He just stood there, a strange look of relief washing over his face. "I never signed up to be tied down with a kid and a wife who will never be more than a teacher," he said, voice cold and foreign. You have no ambition, Jody, no vision. Allison gets me. I watched in stunned silence as he packed a suitcase, methodically emptying drawers as I sobbed on our bed. You deserve someone with ambition, he said, as if he was doing me a favor by destroying our family. I'm moving in with Allison. Don't contact me about the baby situation. I need space to figure things out. And then he was gone, the door closing with a finality that echoed through our apartment, leaving me alone with his cruel words and a baby who would arrive any day. The contractions started that night. Whether from the stress or just coincidental timing, I'll never know. All I know is that the pain of labor felt almost welcome compared to the emotional agony Travis had inflicted. At least physical pain made sense. At least it would end. I called Melissa in a panic, and she drove me to the hospital, holding my hand and promising everything would be okay. Travis didn't answer any of my calls or texts. He didn't respond when Melissa called to tell him his child was being born. He wasn't there when Emma came into the world after 14 hours of labor, red-faced and screaming with a full head of dark hair. She's perfect, Melissa whispered as they placed Emma in my arms. And you did this all by yourself, Jody. You're stronger than you know. The first few weeks of Emma's life passed in a blur of exhaustion, joy, and despair. Postpartum depression settled over me like a heavy blanket, made worse by Travis's complete abandonment. I sent him photos of Emma. I left voicemails telling him about her first pediatrician appointment. I even had Melissa drive me by Allison's apartment once, baby in tow, desperate for him to at least acknowledge his daughter's existence. No response. Meanwhile, the financial reality of single motherhood hit hard. My maternity leave was only partially paid. The rent that had been manageable on 2 incomes was a struggle on just my teacher's salary. Formula costs, diapers, pediatrician visits, all added up. My small savings account dwindled alarmingly fast. You need to file for child support, Melissa urged, bouncing Emma on her knee, while I scanned my bank statement with growing panic. He can't just walk away from his responsibilities. I consulted with a lawyer, but the process would take time. Months, potentially. Especially if Travis tried to evade service or contest paternity. Time I didn't have before the next rent check was due. What about your dad? Melissa asked gently one evening, as I calculated how many more weeks I could survive before returning to work. I know you guys have had your issues, but he's Emma's grandfather. Maybe he'd want to help. No, I said immediately. I haven't spoken to him in 3 years. I can't just call and ask for money. But as the weeks passed and my return to work loomed, bringing with it the additional cost of childcare, I began to reconsider. Pride wouldn't keep a roof over Emma's head or food in her belly. I still had 2 weeks before I needed to secure childcare, and the rent was already 3 days late. With Emma sleeping peacefully in her crib, I finally made the call I'd been dreading. My father answered on the second ring, his voice exactly as I remembered it. Jody? He sounded surprised, perhaps even hopeful. Is everything all right? I broke down immediately, the whole story tumbling out between sobs. The pregnancy, Travis's affair and abandonment, the birth, my financial situation. To my shock, Frank didn't interrupt once, just listened until I had nothing left to say. I'm so sorry, Dad, I whispered at last. I know we haven't spoken in years. I wouldn't ask if I weren't desperate. There was a long pause before he responded, and when he did, his voice sounded strained in a way I'd never heard before. Jody, there's something I need to tell you as well, he said. I have stage 3 pancreatic cancer. The prognosis is uncertain, but it's not good. The news hit me like a physical blow. For all our differences, he was my father. The man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had stayed up all night building science fair projects with me, who had held me when Mom died even as I pushed him away. Dad, I'm so sorry, I managed to say. I shouldn't have called. This isn't your problem. No, Jody. Listen to me, he said firmly. I've regretted our estrangement every single day. I tried to respect your wishes, but I've missed you terribly. And now I have a granddaughter I've never met." His voice broke slightly. "Please, I want to help. And more than that, I want to be in your life again. In Emma's life. For whatever time I have left." We cried together over the phone, years of hurt and misunderstanding between us beginning to heal. And then he made an offer that would change everything. "Come work for me at Warren Technologies," he said. "We'll arrange flexible hours so you can care for Emma. There's a company apartment near the office you can use. And Jody," he paused, "I've always hoped you would take over the company someday. This could be a beginning." I sat in stunned silence. From the brink of financial ruin to a job offer at my father's technology company that I knew nothing about, in the span of a single phone call. It felt unreal. "I don't know the first thing about running a business, Dad." "You're smart, Jody. You can learn. And you won't be alone. I'll teach you everything I know, for as long as I can." 2 days later, Emma and I moved into the company apartment, and my life took a turn I never could have imagined. The company apartment was 3 times the size of the place I had shared with Travis. Floor-to-ceiling windows, granite countertops, hardwood floors. Emma had her own nursery with a custom crib that made Travis's homemade one look like a school project. I felt out of place at first, like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. My father visited the day after we moved in, awkward and formal, until I placed Emma in his arms. His face transformed as he held his granddaughter for the first time, a mixture of wonder and grief passing over his features. "She has your mother's eyes," he whispered, and I saw that he was right. Somehow I hadn't noticed until then. The first few weeks at Warren Technologies were overwhelming. I went from teaching multiplication tables to learning about profit margins, market analysis, and product development. My father arranged for me to rotate through every department, spending 2 weeks in each to get a comprehensive understanding of the business. To my surprise, I found I had an aptitude for it. The same skills that made me a good teacher transferred well to business strategy and management. "You have good instincts," my father said, after I sat in on my first executive meeting. "You asked exactly the right questions." As the weeks turned to months, Emma grew from a newborn to an infant, reaching all her milestones surrounded by the love of her grandfather and a small army of doting employees who had known my father for years. I grew too, from a heartbroken single mother to a confident businesswoman with ideas of my own. 6 months into my new role, I proposed a new product line that would expand Warren Technologies into the consumer market. We had primarily focused on business solutions, but I saw an untapped potential in adaptations of our technology for home use. "It's risky," said Gary Peters, the chief financial officer who had been with my father for 20 years. "We don't have experience in that sector." "That's precisely why we should do it," I argued. "We'll bring fresh eyes to problems our competitors have been looking at the same way for years." My father, thinner now from the chemotherapy but still sharp as ever, watched this exchange with undisguised pride. He backed my proposal, and 3 months later, our first consumer product launched to unexpected success. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings for child support from Travis continued at a glacial pace. He had quit his job at the construction company shortly after leaving me, making him harder to track for service of papers. When he was finally served, he failed to appear for the first hearing, resulting in further delays. I tried not to let it bother me. Emma and I were financially secure now, but the principle of it still stung. His complete disinterest in his own child was a wound that wouldn't heal. One evening, after a particularly successful day at the office where a major client had signed on specifically because of my consumer initiative, my father asked me to stay late. The office emptied out, and he led me into the boardroom, closing the door behind us. "Jody, I need to talk to you about the future," he said, lowering himself carefully into a chair. The cancer treatments were taking their toll, though he fought hard not to show it. "I've changed my will," he continued. Warren Technologies is now valued at $33 million. When I'm gone, you will become the majority shareholder and chief executive officer. I stared at him, unable to process the magnitude of what he was saying. $33 million. CEO. The teacher who had been stretching to make rent payments a year ago was now being handed the keys to a multi-million-dollar company. Dad, I don't know if I'm ready for that, I admitted. I've only been here a year. And in that year, you've shown more natural business acumen than executives I've known for decades, he countered. You're ready, Jody. And more importantly, you're exactly what this company needs to move into the future. I was still absorbing this news when I got home that night and opened my laptop to check emails. A notification from a social media site I rarely used caught my attention. It was a mutual friend tagging Allison in wedding photos. With a sense of morbid curiosity, I clicked through. There was Travis, standing at an altar in an expensive-looking suit, sliding a ring onto Allison's finger. They were surrounded by elaborate floral arrangements in what appeared to be a high-end venue. The timestamp showed the wedding had taken place just last weekend. I scrolled through more photos, feeling an odd detachment. Travis was smiling in every picture, looking prosperous and pleased with himself. One caption mentioned his thriving new construction business, though I knew from the legal proceedings that he claimed to have no regular income. It was strange to see the man who had abandoned me and his unborn child, now playing happy newlywed, while contributing nothing to Emma's upbringing. But as I closed my laptop and went to check on my sleeping daughter, I realized something important. The pain that had once seemed unbearable had dulled to a distant ache. I was building something meaningful with my life, something that would secure Emma's future in ways Travis could never imagine. 1 year later, life looked dramatically different. Emma celebrated her first birthday with a small party at the office, charming everyone as she toddled between desks in a frilly dress, her dark hair now in tiny pigtails. I had fully grown into my executive role, respected by employees who had initially been skeptical of the boss's daughter. My consumer product line had expanded to 5 offerings, becoming Warren Technologies' most profitable division. The company valuation had increased from $33 million to nearly $40 million under my leadership, a fact that both delighted and surprised me. Who would have thought that a former elementary school teacher would have such a knack for business strategy? My father's condition had worsened, but he fought with remarkable tenacity, determined to see Emma grow and to witness my continued success at the company. He had moved into the apartment next to ours, allowing us to help care for him while still giving him some independence. "You're a natural at this, Jody," he told me one evening as we reviewed quarterly reports. "Better than I ever was." "I had a good teacher," I replied, squeezing his hand, much thinner now than it had been a year ago. After months of legal maneuvering, we finally received a court date for the child support hearing. Travis had delayed, rescheduled, and claimed hardship, but the judge had lost patience with his tactics. I spent evenings preparing financial records and documentation of his complete absence from Emma's life, determined to secure what was rightfully hers, even though we didn't need the money. 3 days before the scheduled hearing, a legal notification arrived at my office. Travis was petitioning to terminate his parental rights. "This could be good news, my lawyer," Sarah Jenkins told me over the phone. "If he terminates rights, he's acknowledging his absence from Emma's life. It could make the child support case more straightforward." I felt an unexpected sense of relief. Travis was finally taking responsibility, in a way, by legally acknowledging what had been true all along: he had no interest in being Emma's father. It stung, of course, that he could so easily discard his own child, but at least we could move forward with legal clarity. The next day, I met with Sarah to discuss the petition. Her office was in a modern building downtown, with views of the river where Travis and I had once walked on early dates. It felt like another lifetime. "There's something you should know before we proceed," Sarah said, shuffling papers on her desk. The timing of this petition is suspicious. It coincides with the court finally setting a firm date for the child support hearing after all his delays. What are you saying? I'm saying that based on the language in the petition and the timing, I believe Travis is trying to terminate his parental rights, specifically to avoid paying the accumulated child support debt. In most states, terminating rights doesn't automatically end financial responsibility, but it can complicate collection. I absorbed this information slowly, anger building. So he's not even doing this for Emma's benefit. He's doing it to protect himself. That would be my assessment, Sarah said. I've arranged a meeting with his attorney tomorrow to clarify intentions before we respond. Would you like to be present? The next day, I arrived at Sarah's office in my best business suit, hair pulled back in a sleek bun, projecting the confidence I'd developed over the last year as an executive. I was no longer the heartbroken, financially desperate woman Travis had left behind. When he walked in with his attorney, I almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the working-class contractor in jeans and work boots. This Travis wore a tailored suit, an expensive watch, and a wedding ring that caught the light as he gestured. He did a double take when he saw me, clearly not expecting my presence. "Miss Warren," his attorney began, a middle-aged man with a practiced smile. "We appreciate your willingness to meet before the formal hearing. My client is seeking a clean break that will benefit all parties." "I'm curious about the timing," Sarah responded. "Your client has shown no interest in his daughter for nearly 2 years. Why petition now, just days before a child support hearing?" Travis shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I've made a new life for myself. Allison and I are married now. I want to put the past behind me." "Including your financial responsibility to the child you fathered?" I asked, speaking directly to him for the first time. He had the decency to look slightly embarrassed, but recovered quickly. "I'm not in a position to provide meaningful support right now. My business is just getting started, and the majority of the assets are tied up in loans and equipment." "Interesting," I said, opening a folder I had brought. "Because according to your social media profiles, business appears to be booming. You've completed 3 major projects in the last 6 months. And yet you've contributed exactly $0 to Emma's upbringing." Travis's eyes narrowed. "I see you've been running to Daddy for help after all. Got a job at his company, living off his money now?" I smiled coolly, noticing how he still had no idea of my actual position. "I've been taking care of our daughter without any help from you, Travis. That's all that matters here." The meeting continued with legal technicalities, but I barely heard them. I was struck by the realization that the man I had once loved, who had once seemed so full of potential, was actually small and petty. He sat there in his expensive clothes, while attempting to legally abandon his child to avoid financial responsibility. I had dodged a bullet when he left, though it hadn't felt that way at the time. As we concluded the meeting, Travis stopped me at the door. "You look different," he said, his eyes trailing over my designer suit and the confidence I now wore like armor. "Teaching must be paying better these days." "I don't teach anymore," I replied simply. "Things change." I walked out without looking back, already planning my next move. If Travis thought he could simply erase his responsibilities, he was about to learn otherwise. The months that followed brought significant changes to both my professional and personal life. My father entered hospice care as the cancer progressed despite aggressive treatments. I balanced my grief with the increasing responsibilities of running the company, spending mornings in the office and afternoons at his bedside with Emma. "You were right to be angry with me after your mother died," he said one day, his voice weaker than I had ever heard it. "I was so lost in the business that I missed the signs of her illness. I won't make that mistake again, Jody. Every moment with you and Emma now is precious." Even as my personal life faced this impending loss, my professional life reached new heights. A major competitor approached Warren Technologies with an acquisition opportunity that could potentially double the company's value. The board members, most of whom had served alongside my father for decades, expressed concerns about my readiness to handle such a significant transaction. Frank, with all due respect, Gary Peters said during a meeting where my father insisted on being present despite his weakened state, Jody has been with the company less than 2 years. This deal could transform Warren Technologies. Are we certain she's prepared to lead negotiations of this magnitude? My father looked at me, not answering immediately, giving me space to respond. I appreciate your concern, Gary, I said, meeting his gaze directly. But I've spent the last 18 months learning every aspect of this business. I understand our value proposition and growth potential better than anyone except my father. More importantly, I have a vision for where we can take this company that aligns with its founding principles. I outlined my negotiation strategy, emphasizing points that would strengthen our position while ensuring the company's core values remained intact. By the end of the presentation, even Gary looked impressed. "Let her lead," my father said simply. "She's ready." The negotiations lasted 3 intense weeks, during which I barely left the office, except to visit my father and tuck Emma in at night. To everyone's surprise, including my own, I secured terms even more favorable than our initial targets. The final agreement not only doubled the company valuation, but preserved autonomy for our core operations and guaranteed employment for all current staff. The business press caught wind of the deal, running a feature story about Warren Technologies' hidden heiress, who had emerged from obscurity to orchestrate one of the year's most impressive acquisitions. The article detailed my unusual path from elementary school teacher to CEO, complete with speculation about the company's $33 million valuation potentially doubling in the near future. I kept the magazine away from my father, not wanting him to worry about the public attention, but he saw it anyway. "They got one thing wrong," he said, tapping the headline weakly. "You're not a hidden heiress. You're a business leader who earned her position through intelligence and hard work." "I'm so proud of you, Jody." Emma celebrated her 3rd birthday at my father's bedside, singing happy birthday to herself in her sweet toddler voice while he watched with tears in his eyes. She had never known a life that included Travis, never missed the father who had abandoned her before birth. To her, family meant her mother and grandfather, plus the extended network of company employees who had embraced us. As my father's condition deteriorated, he spent more time sharing family history and business wisdom, determined to pass on everything he could in the time remaining. "The company is just a vehicle, Jody," he told me one evening. "What matters is how you use it to make a difference in people's lives. Your consumer products are doing that. Your leadership is doing that. Don't lose sight of the human impact in the pursuit of growth." I was fully stepping into my power as both a businesswoman and a mother, finding a balance that worked for us and honoring my father's legacy even as I prepared to say goodbye. Then came the text message I never expected to receive. "Travis, hey Jody, been thinking about you and Emma a lot lately. Would love to reconnect and discuss co-parenting. It's been too long. Coffee sometime?" 2 years of complete silence, and now he wanted to discuss co-parenting? The timing aligned perfectly with the national press coverage of Warren Technologies' expansion and my position as CEO. I didn't believe in coincidences. "He saw the article?" Melissa said, when I showed her the text during our weekly lunch. $33 million has a way of jogging a man's memory about his forgotten child. "What should I do?" I asked, genuinely uncertain. "Ignore him?" "Or," Melissa suggested, a mischievous glint in her eye, "find out exactly what he wants. Knowledge is power, right? Isn't that what your business books say?" After careful consideration, I decided she was right. Before responding to Travis, I hired a private investigator to research his current situation. If he was attempting to re-enter our lives after 2 years of absence, I wanted to know exactly what I was dealing with. "Travis, great to hear from you. It has been a long time. I'd be open to meeting to discuss Emma. How about next Friday at the Harbor Cafe at 1 p.m.? His response came almost immediately. excessively friendly and enthusiastic. The Travis I had known would never have used that many exclamation points or heart emojis. Something was definitely off. The private investigator promised preliminary findings before the scheduled meeting. I arranged for Emma to stay with Melissa during that time, uncertain whether I would ultimately bring her to meet the father she had never known. The meeting would take place at the Harbor Cafe, a restaurant that, unbeknownst to Travis, was now owned by Warren Technologies as part of a small hospitality division I had launched the previous quarter. The staff knew me as the boss, not as a woman meeting her ex-husband. This gave me a home field advantage I hadn't specifically planned but appreciated nonetheless. As the meeting approached, I found myself surprisingly calm. The woman Travis had left behind no longer existed. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and far more powerful than he could possibly imagine. My father passed peacefully in his sleep 3 days before my scheduled meeting with Travis. I was holding his hand when the monitors flatlined, Emma asleep in a chair beside us. Though we had been preparing for this moment for months, the finality of it hit me with unexpected force. "Thank you," I whispered to him, squeezing his hand one last time. "For everything." The funeral was held 2 days later, a dignified affair attended by business associates, employees, and the small circle of friends I had maintained through my transformation from teacher to CEO. During the service, I was publicly acknowledged as the new chief executive of Warren Technologies, the company valuation now officially reaching $33 million following the acquisition deal I had negotiated. Despite my grief, I decided to keep the meeting with Travis. Part of me wanted to cancel, to take time to mourn properly, but another part recognized that resolving this loose end would allow me to focus fully on the future. After much deliberation, I decided to bring Emma. She was too young to understand who Travis was, but something in me wanted him to see what he had walked away from the beautiful, bright little girl who had been growing up without him. I arrived at the Harbor Cafe precisely on time, Emma's hand in mine. She wore a navy blue dress with white trim, her dark hair in neat braids. I had chosen a simple but elegant black dress, still in mourning for my father but also projecting the confidence of a woman in control of her life. Travis was already seated at a table near the window, nervously checking his watch. He looked up as we approached, his expression cycling rapidly from recognition to surprise to a plastered-on smile. "Jody," he stood, awkwardly leaning in, as if unsure whether to hug me or shake my hand. He did neither, instead crouching down to Emma's level. "And this must be Emma. Wow, she's so big now." Emma shrank back against my legs, regarding this stranger with healthy suspicion. "It's okay, sweetie," I assured her. "This is an old friend of Mommy's. We're just having lunch." We settled at the table, Emma immediately focusing on the children's menu and crayons the server provided. Travis couldn't stop staring at her. "She looks like you," he said softly. "Same eyes." "What did you want to discuss, Travis?" I asked, getting straight to the point. He seemed to collect himself, straightening his posture and adopting what I recognized as his business negotiation face. It was the same expression he had used when discussing contracting jobs in our previous life. "First, I want to say I'm sorry for how things ended between us," he began, his voice dripping with rehearsed sincerity. "I was young and scared, and made some terrible decisions. I've regretted walking away from Emma every day since." I said nothing, watching him squirm slightly under my steady gaze. "I've been following your career," he continued when it became clear I wasn't going to help him out. "The business press coverage, your company's expansion. It's surprisingly impressive, Jody. I always knew you had potential." The condescension in his tone was barely concealed. Surprisingly impressive, as if my success was some unexpected quirk rather than the result of intelligence and hard work. "Thank you," I replied neutrally. "You mentioned wanting to discuss co-parenting. That's a significant change from your position over the last 3 years." Travis launched into a clearly rehearsed speech about growth and maturity, about realizing what truly matters in life, about wanting to be present for Emma moving forward. He spoke about regretting mistakes and seeking second chances, all while throwing pointed questions about the company valuation and my inheritance into the conversation. "I heard Warren Technologies is worth around $33 million now," he said, attempting casualness. "Your father must have been very proud before he passed. My condolences, by the way." "Thank you," I said again, noting how he had gleaned that information despite it not being mentioned in our brief text exchange. "Emma, sweetie, would you like chicken fingers or mac and cheese?" As Emma deliberated this important decision with all the seriousness a 3-year-old could muster, Travis leaned forward. "I've been thinking, Jody. Maybe we should consider trying again, for Emma's sake. Every child deserves both parents in their life, right? A real family." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. Was he actually suggesting we rekindle our relationship after everything? Before I could formulate a response, a man in a suit approached our table. "Excuse me, Miss Warren," he said quietly. "I have that urgent information package you requested." The private investigator placed a manila envelope on the table and retreated discreetly. Travis's eyes followed the envelope with poorly concealed interest. "What's that?" he asked, trying to sound casual. I opened the envelope and scanned its contents quickly. The findings were exactly what I had suspected, but seeing the evidence laid out so clearly still took me aback. "It seems," I said slowly, "that your construction business hasn't been as successful as your social media suggests. In fact, according to these records, you and Allison have filed for bankruptcy protection twice in the last year. Your home is in foreclosure proceedings, and you've accumulated significant debt from failed business ventures." Travis's face drained of color. "How did you—" "There's more," I continued, pulling out another sheet. "Text messages between you and Allison discussing, and I quote, 'how to get back with Jody for the money.' Interesting timing, considering the press coverage of Warren Technologies' valuation." I turned to another page. "Oh, and it appears Allison has already filed for divorce, citing financial irresponsibility and emotional abandonment. Sound familiar?" Travis's facade crumbled completely. Gone was the contrite father figure, replaced by the angry, entitled man I had glimpsed the day he walked out. "You always thought you were so much better than me," he hissed, keeping his voice low but intense. "Even when you were just a teacher barely making rent. And now what? You got lucky because Daddy gave you a company?" I kept my expression neutral, conscious of Emma beside me, though she was happily coloring and seemingly oblivious to the tension. "I worked for everything I have," I replied evenly. "Just as I've worked to provide for Emma without any help from you for the past 3 years. Well, guess what?" Travis leaned forward, dropping all pretense now. "I'm her father. I have rights. And if you don't help me out of a tight spot, I'll fight for custody." How would that look for the big CEO, huh? A messy custody battle in the press? "On what grounds?" I asked calmly. "You've had zero contact with Emma since before she was born. You've provided no financial support. You've shown no interest in her welfare until precisely when you learned about my company's valuation." "I've changed," he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "And courts favor reuniting children with biological parents. It would be a mess, Jody. For you and for her." He glanced meaningfully at Emma, and something inside me went cold. "What exactly do you want, Travis?" He named a figure that would clear his debts and set him up comfortably. Not millions, but substantial nonetheless. "I've borrowed money from some dangerous people," he admitted. "They're making threats. I need to pay them off and start fresh. You've got millions now. This is nothing to you, but it would save my life." I studied him for a long moment, seeing clearly for the first time how small he truly was. The man I had once loved, who I had believed in and supported, was nothing but a manipulative opportunist willing to use his own child as leverage for financial gain. "You know," I said softly, "I actually recorded this entire conversation. I nodded toward the small device partially concealed by my napkin. Including your admission of using Emma as a bargaining chip, and your attempt to extort money from me by threatening a custody battle you know you can't win. Travis's eyes widened as he realized the trap he had walked into. Around us, several restaurant staff members had casually positioned themselves nearby, watching the situation carefully. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice calm and measured. You're going to sign complete termination of parental rights papers, which my lawyer has prepared and will be arriving with momentarily. In exchange, I will pay off your dangerous debts directly not to you, but to the creditors themselves, and you will permanently disappear from our lives. And if I don't? He challenged, though his voice lacked conviction. Then I'll play this recording for the judge at our upcoming child support hearing, along with evidence of your attempted extortion. I'm quite sure they'll be interested in your creative approach to parental responsibility. As if on cue, Sarah Jenkins entered the restaurant, legal documents in hand. Travis looked from her to me, then to Emma, who had finished her coloring and was now eating chicken fingers with the focused determination of a toddler. You planned all this, he said, a mixture of defeat and something like respect in his voice. I learned business strategy from the best, I replied simply. Travis signed the papers with a shaking hand, not meeting my eyes. As he stood to leave, he looked at Emma one last time. She really does have your eyes, he said quietly. And for just a moment, I caught a glimpse of genuine regret before it was replaced by the bitterness that seemed to define him now. Goodbye, Travis, I said firmly. I'll have the creditors contacted by the end of the day. He nodded once and walked out of the restaurant and out of our lives for good. Mommy, who was that man? Emma asked as she reached for her juice. Just someone Mommy used to know, sweetheart, I replied, stroking her hair. He's not important anymore. 5 years passed, each one better than the last. Warren Technologies continued to thrive under my leadership, expanding into new markets while staying true to the core values my father had established. The company valuation had more than doubled since his passing, now approaching $70 million. Emma grew into a confident, bright 8-year-old who excelled in school and showed an early interest in both technology and teaching, a combination that made me smile. She had no memory of the meeting with Travis and knew only that her biological father had been unable to be part of our family. Family isn't always about blood, I explained when she eventually asked more questions. It's about who loves you and takes care of you every day. She seemed satisfied with this answer, surrounded as she was by the love of our extended network of friends and the Warren Technologies family who had embraced us both. In the years following my father's death, I established the Frank Warren Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting single parents with business education and startup funding. The foundation focused particularly on parents who had been abandoned by partners during pregnancy or early parenthood, offering them pathways to financial independence and career growth. We believe that crisis can be transformed into opportunity with the right support, I stated in my speech at the foundation's launch. No one should have to choose between parenting and professional fulfillment. I began dating again, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as I established healthier boundaries and expectations. Mark Sullivan, an architectural engineer I met through a foundation event, became a steady presence in our lives. His patience with Emma and respect for my busy schedule made him different from anyone I had dated before, including Travis. You're not like other CEOs I've worked with, he told me, after attending a Warren Technologies product launch. You actually care about the impact of your work, not just the bottom line. I had a good teacher, I replied, thinking of my father. As part of the foundation's work, I established a mentoring program specifically for women escaping bad relationships, helping them rebuild confidence and develop marketable skills. The transformation I witnessed in these women reminded me of my own journey from heartbroken, abandoned mother to confident business leader. Through industry connections, I occasionally heard updates about Travis. He and Allison had indeed divorced, their relationship unable to survive the financial pressures and mutual resentment. Travis had returned to working construction, ironically now employed as a laborer on projects developed by a subsidiary of Warren Technologies, though he remained unaware of the connection. Then came the phone call that had opened this story. Travis's name flashing on my screen after 5 years of silence. I had changed my number twice since our last interaction, so he must have gone to considerable effort to reach me. I answered, with cautious curiosity. Jody, his voice sounded older, worn down by the years that had passed. I know I have no right to call you. What do you want, Travis? I asked, not unkindly but firmly establishing boundaries from the outset. I'm in trouble again, he admitted. Different trouble this time. Medical bills. I had an accident on a construction site. No insurance. The company I'm working for says they're not liable. He paused. I didn't know where else to turn. You're right, I replied after a moment. You don't have any right to call me. We haven't spoken in 5 years. You signed away your rights to Emma. I know, he said quickly. I'm not asking about Emma. I wouldn't. I heard your company is doing well. I thought maybe, for old time's sake. I sat back in my executive chair, looking out over the city skyline from my office. The irony wasn't lost on me that Travis was now calling from a position of desperation, unaware that he was actually employed by a contractor that my company owned through a series of subsidiaries. I could help him. I could pay his medical bills with what amounted to pocket change for me now. I could even offer him a better position within one of my companies. The power to drastically change his circumstances was entirely in my hands. 5 years ago, I might have felt vindictive satisfaction at this reversal of fortune. The abandoned pregnant woman now in position to deny help to the man who had walked out. But the person I had become wasn't interested in revenge. Success, family, and purpose had healed those old wounds. I'm sorry you're going through this, Travis, I said sincerely. But I'm not the person you should be asking for help. We haven't been in each other's lives for a reason. Jody, please, he began, but I gently interrupted. There are resources available for people in your situation, I continued. The Community Health Alliance has a program specifically for uninsured construction workers. I'd suggest you start there. After providing him with contact information for legitimate assistance programs, I ended the call, feeling a sense of peaceful closure rather than triumph or resentment. Later that evening, as Emma and I made dinner together in our home kitchen, I reflected on the long, unexpected journey that had brought us here. From the devastated pregnant woman crying on her bed to the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. From financial desperation to abundant security. From heartbreak to healing. Mom, can I add the cheese now? Emma asked, pulling me back to the present moment. Go for it, sweetheart. I smiled, watching her carefully sprinkle shredded cheese over the pasta bake we were preparing. I learned something important in school today, she announced, with the seriousness only an 8-year-old can muster for ordinary revelations. What was that? Miss Patterson said that being rich isn't just about having money. It's about having people who love you and doing things that matter. I felt my eyes fill with unexpected tears. Miss Patterson sounds very wise. She is, Emma nodded firmly. I told her my mom runs a big company and helps people. That makes us the richest family ever, right? I pulled her into a tight hug, overwhelmed by gratitude for this child who had been the catalyst for my entire transformation. Absolutely right. The very richest. As we sat down to dinner, I thought about the lessons I wanted to teach Emma as she grew. That pain can transform into purpose when you refuse to let others define your worth. That the worst moments of your life can sometimes lead to the best if you're brave enough to keep moving forward. That true wealth comes from integrity and resilience, not just financial success. Most of all, I wanted her to know that her value was intrinsic and immutable, never dependent on anyone else's ability to recognize it. The journey from abandoned wife to empowered CEO had taught me that we all have strength we never knew existed until circumstances force us to discover it. My father had seen potential in me that I hadn't recognized in myself. Travis's betrayal, painful as it was, had ultimately freed me to become the person I was meant to be. Sometimes the worst endings make way for the best beginnings. Sometimes being left behind is the first step toward finding your way forward. What unexpected events have transformed your life in ways you never could have predicted? Have you ever experienced a painful ending that ultimately led to something better? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that their current ending could be leading to their best beginning. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to keep moving forward through whatever challenges you're facing today.